Thank you and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level podcast. My name is Kevin. I'm joined by my co-host Eric. Welcome back for our 12th episode this week, where we'll be breaking down this past Sunday's game versus the Browns, discussing some news around the NFL, and previewing the upcoming game versus the Falcons. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So Eric, I think this is probably, I would say, the biggest game of the year so far for the Patriots, a season-defining victory, and there's a few more probably coming up down the road. So what do you think the kind of your biggest takeaway of this game after watching it?
Yeah, so I think this is probably arguably their best win of the season, hands down. It was against a good opponent or a team that we thought was very good going into the game, and they just absolutely dominated throughout. There was that first drive where they allowed the Browns to march down the field. I think it was a 78, 79 play drive or 79-yard drive for a touchdown where it looked like maybe this game is going to be closer than we thought. I know both of us predicted the Patriots to win relatively easily. I know we weren't expecting a blowout, but we thought it was going to be a close game, but that it would be pretty handled victory. But and after that first drive, we thought maybe this might be close. But after that, defense pretty much just clamped down, held them to, I think, over their next six drives, only 36 yards. Then the offense was spectacular. I think they punted the ball only one time, had a field goal, but it was just an absolutely dominating victory in all three phases of the game. And trying to think back, this is probably one of their best all-around victories in maybe the last 5 years or so, dating back to even before the 2018 season. Just all three phases, just absolutely dominant against a good team. The Jets game was a big blowout, but like we said after it, the Patriots played well, but the Jets were a very inferior opponent. This was a team that a lot of people had predicted as potentially going to the Super Bowl this year in the Browns. So it was just an excellent victory. All three phases, just fantastic.
Yeah, I think I just have to echo kind of what you were saying. Um, this is where a lot of people kind of turn their heads and say, well, maybe the Patriots have got something cooking here. If I were definitely the Bills, I would be kind of scared looking in the rearview mirror at the Patriots and kind of thinking just when is it going to be our chance, because it's looking like the Patriots are kind of trying to come for the division again. And I think, like you had said, after that first drive, the Patriots locked down from there. And something I had said during the game too, that the Patriots have done a lot of this year. They'll be a little bit softer on the first drive. They'll see what the team is bringing against them, and they'll make the adjustments right there and there, and be a lot more solid afterwards. And we've seen it the last few weeks, where some offensive kind of got to some good starts and they start clamping down afterwards. So I think the biggest takeaway though again is it's a 4-game winning streak. They look the best that they looked all year. Mac has looked the best he's looked all year. The defense has looked as good as it has all year, and it looks like they're starting to finally click. And that's something we had said from the beginning of the year. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be an overnight click with this whole team. It's not going to be something where you bring 11 new starters on offense and defense together and have them all come together for the first game and be fluid. It takes time. It takes about halfway through the season. We're at that point now. So we're starting to see the sloppiness kind of get down, and then the offense and defense starting to mesh more while they're playing more together. So I think as long as they keep this up, and it looks like they should be able to, they're going to be pretty big competitors coming forward. So the next few weeks are going to be really important for them.
Yep. And then just echoing one thing that you were saying is this is something that we even saw during some of the dominant Patriots years, early 2000s, and then even the middle 2010s, 2014, 2015, 2016, when they had very good defenses. What we would see them, some of the defenses when they were ranked one of the top two scoring defenses in the NFL, historically, that first drive, they'd allow them to march down the field. They'd allow them possibly scoring. Then after that, just completely clamping down and not allowing much. Part of that has to do with the offense coordinator typically has first 10, 15 plays scripted, so they know going into the game what they're going to do. And defenses aren't able to have as much time to adjust. And then once they do, that's when you see the really dominant defenses coming into play. And that's something that we saw this against the Chargers a couple weeks ago. Chargers marched down the field had a touchdown on that first drive. Then after that, we held them to, I think, 17 points, or they might have scored one more in garbage time, but pretty much dominate the rest of the game. So they're looking really good, the defense overall. And then just completely blank what my second thought was going to be, something that you were saying, but I'll let you move on to your next point.
Yeah, and I think this talking a little bit more about the defense. Zolak had mentioned today too, and something I didn't really catch during the game, but on that first drive, if you look at Belichick on the sideline, when they got around probably to like the 20-yard line, you could see him kind of squatting down, staring intently at the line, and he ended up making the adjustment there that they weren't playing as tight on the defensive line. They're giving up too much space in between the nose tackle and the other ends. So that was one just quick adjustment that they made by bringing everyone a little bit tighter. So that way there wasn't as much room between the tackles to provide that. So it was just one even quick change for them. And the biggest change was that they were more nickel on the opening drive, and they went more towards base and tempted them to throw it. And that's something that we saw, and we'll get into a little bit later. But they had such success running the ball where the Patriots gave them a look where, I should check out of the run because they're loading up the box. But then it forced Baker to try and win the game, and we all know what happened there.
Yeah, I just remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Just echoing this 4-game win streak, and even just especially these last 3 games. Earlier in the season, we were thinking, looking at this tough 3-game stretch of at Chargers, at the Panthers, at home versus the Browns, we thought if the Patriots want to have a chance of making the playoffs, at worst they have to go 2-1, and we thought that still might be a little iffy. These are some competitive games or competitive teams, and then beating the Chargers on the road, then pretty much blowing out, completely shutting down Carolina. I know that they had some injuries, and then just absolutely dominating the Browns just shows that we thought if they can get lucky and win these 2 games, they might have a shot. They just absolutely dominated, and it's just a good sign going forward.
Yep, exactly. And then the offensive line, as we've really talked about every single week, you get Trent Brown back, and surprisingly, it wasn't Karras, it wasn't Wynn that was sat, it was Owenu. So I think it's really interesting to kind of look at, but it could change next week. Trent Brown looked really well on his first game back. He played the majority of the game, which I thought was surprising based on only practicing a couple days and not really being kind of softened into his transition. But they did rest him every few series, and they had Owenu come in and play for him. So I don't know if maybe the reason why they kind of sat Owenu was that way he could just take the place of Brown when they sat him occasionally in different drives. That way they weren't taxing him too much. Or if they decided that Karras is their best left guard going forward, and Owenu is just kind of the last person out on this. So, but it was really nice to see. Mac was barely pressured at all in this game, especially even though the Browns have a very good defensive line. You barely saw much pressure for them. They really attacked their line that pretty well.
Yeah. I think going into it, when I saw that Mike Reese earlier before the game tweeted out what the offensive line warming up was, I misread it at first. I thought it was saying that I saw Karras was at left guard, so I just assumed that Owenu was starting at right tackle. So I was like, oh, this is pretty much what we thought, that Trent Brown was going to be like break glass if needed if Isaiah Wynn can't handle Garrett. But no, they started Trent Brown over Owenu, who's been arguably an all-pro tackle this year. But Trent Brown was great, especially in the run game. I don't know if maybe they just thought matchup-wise, going up against Clowney, going up against a very good, one of the best run defenses in the NFL, using Brown might be more beneficial. And then against other teams, you might want to use Owenu depending on the matchups. But overall, they were great. I know Mac was sacked twice. The first one by Myles Garrett wasn't even really the offensive line's fault. I know Garrett went by Isaiah Wynn, but it was a cut block. It was supposed to be a 3-step drop and then throw the ball. But the defense pretty much covered all the receivers, so Mac had nowhere to throw. So it was more just defensive back coverage sack. And then after that, just one other sack, a few hurries and pressures here and there. But overall, just absolutely excellent. That's pretty much the best you can ask for going up against this defensive front, and it's good considering how bad the offensive line was earlier in the year.
Exactly. And it's nice to see them kind of coming together as a unit. Now, looking at the Browns, what do you really think of their team? Kind of the big players, Baker, Garrett, Jarvis Landry. What do you have to make of him? I know you're not really a big Baker fan.
Yeah.
So what were your kind of thoughts on him and the
Yeah,
rest?
Baker pretty much shown what I thought he was. He was actually probably worse than I thought. Like going into it, I thought Baker's not that good. I think he's overrated. I think what I think of Baker is a worse Kirk Cousins, where he can't win you the game, and he might do enough to like possibly be a game manager, but he's not going to win you the game. And there's sometimes he might lose your game. He just looked horrendous. He was for passes 8 yards or more down the line, downfield. He was 0 for 7 with an interception. Overall, 11 of 21, 73 yards, one touchdown, which was a great catch by Hooper, and then one interception. He was pretty horrendous. And considering if you have to face the Browns in the playoffs, I don't see them being much of a challenge unless you have some turnovers, because I don't think Baker can win them a game. He might be able to, if the defense is able to win the game, he might be able to do enough to manage, but I don't think him alone can win a game. Myles Garrett is a tremendous defensive end. Probably is in the running and probably should win Defensive Player of the Year. But Bill Belichick, as we've seen, knows how to take away opponents' number one player, number one option. We've seen it historically where JJ Watt, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, I think he maybe had one sack in his entire career against the Patriots. We saw it a couple weeks ago against Joey Bosa with the Chargers. We saw it against Joey Bosa in the playoffs a few years ago. One of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Just Belichick's scheming is so good that he pretty much neutralizes them. So I thought they did great. Isaiah Wynn probably had one of the best games of his career going up against Myles Garrett, which is impressive. And then Jarvis Landry, I know he's been dealing with some injuries. It didn't look like he was much of a factor in the game. I don't know how much of it was still nagging injuries or just going up against the Patriots defense. But I think after this game, I know it's kind of hindsight's 2020, but they don't really look like a team that can beat the Patriots in the playoffs or advance unless their defense carries them.
Yeah, I think the Baker, I still don't agree with your full assessment of him. I know this game he didn't look well, and there are things about his play that gets him in trouble really easily. I think some of his intangibles, I still think he is a winner, even though he didn't play like at this game. Part of the reason though for that and the way that the Patriots knew how they could attack him is that if you try and get the ball in his hands, he tries to try and make some of those superhero plays, where he's running around trying to get a play out of nothing, and that gets him in trouble a lot. And that's something that Mahomes we've seen a lot with this year too, where he's trying to do too much than what he actually should be doing. So I think he's actually the opposite of a game manager. I think he takes too much risks. He's kind of more like a Brett Favre. He's kind of like who's the other player? There's another one where they'll give you a couple interceptions. You just have to catch them. So he's kind of like that. I do think he's got talent. I think if he had better coaching around him, especially from the start of his career, he would be a better player right now. Like if the Patriots drafted him like they were intending to a few years ago. But you also see why the Browns haven't offered him that contract extension yet, because they're not sure yet on him. But I also kind of blame that on the Browns themselves too for the position they've put him in so far. And like Garrett, like you said, they had a really good strategy for him. A lot of double teaming, a lot of chipping from the tight ends, and especially from Harry, who did a really good job in the run game. So I was actually really impressed with his blocking in there. I know you pointed that out a few times. But yeah, I think overall, I think the biggest kind of takeaway from the Browns was just the coaching mismatch there, where, like I said, even though the Patriots did go in base afterwards to try and stop the run, they did stop it a few times. They ran 60 yards on the first drive, and barely ran the ball afterwards, and got into trying to be like a throwing match with just Baker, and that was their biggest letdown, I think, because I think they still could have ran more effectively, and at least given the Patriots something to think about rather than throwing it as much. So I think Stefanski's play calling there, getting away from the run, really kind of hurt them, and then put them in a bind by making Baker try and win it for him, which he couldn't. So I think that's really the biggest takeaway from the Browns, where it was kind of a coaching mismatch where they got away from the run. And Myles Garrett said after the game, they made no defensive adjustments at all in the game, which it doesn't even sound realistic. But if he's saying that, it's something that he's probably not happy with. And something you've seen the last few weeks where the Patriots have started to break teams and they start going against each other, and something that used to happen back with the old days. So it's pretty interesting to see. So
yeah, it's the
basically,
third. Oh, sorry. Just to go on to that point, that's the third straight week that after the game, players on the opposing team have called out their coaches for how they manage the game. I know who's it? Joey Bosa called out his coach for not making any adjustments or not doing what they practiced. Some players on the Panthers did that against Matt Rule too, and now Myles Garrett. So I wonder if it's starting to get, since the Patriots are starting to get good, if coaches are starting to Belichick starting to get in their head again. Something that we used to see historically, especially like some of the bad coaches, like Mike Tomlin's just the first one that comes to mind, or people like that.
So kind of looking at coaches on our side, on offensive, defensive side, who do you think had a better game this past Sunday?
I know this is something that I wrote in as one of the questions to ask, and I really don't know, because outside of that first drive, defense was absolutely phenomenal. Next 6 drives allowing 36 yards against one of the better offenses in the NFL. Josh McDaniels just called one hell of a game. They're facing the third best rushing defense, and they ran for almost 200 yards. Browns were only allowing 85 yards a game. You're facing the number one pass rush defense. They got 2 sacks, but one of them wasn't really even because of the pass rush. It was because of the play call. And then after that, one other sack, and then a few hurries and pressures here and there. But Mac pretty much wasn't under stress throughout the game. And a lot of that's due to the play calling that Josh McDaniels had. So I think it kind of has to be a tie that both were just absolutely spectacular. Granted, on the defensive side, I don't know how much is Steve versus Bill, but whoever it was, defense was phenomenal. And then Josh McDaniels was absolutely excellent. And then another thing is just the play calling that he had for Mac was spectacular as well. And it allowed the receivers to get open. I know last week Panthers had a good pass rush, and Mac had to get the ball out quick. Mac got the ball out in 2.26 seconds, and he was spectacular, which shows part of it is due to he was able to read the defense quick, but also the receivers were able to make their breaks on their defenders quick and get open, which is something that has been iffy here and there this season.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tough question that you kind of posed. And well, actually I posed here, but you're the one that actually wrote down the question.
Yeah.
So but I would say a tie is pretty close to what you're saying, because it was pretty much almost perfect on both sides. Other than that first drive touchdown, the defense basically pitched a shutout from there. And Josh, this was one of his best games he's ever called here, I think.
I agree.
At least this season, definitely this season, but it could be even further.
Even the Jets game, granted against a bad team, but they were spectacular in the Jets game too.
But he just knew exactly when to kind of push each thing, whether it be a run, whether it be a screen, whether it be a deep pass to open up the rest of the field afterwards. He just had a really good rhythm this game. It was definitely his best game this year, and that's something that we saw where I can't remember what game it was, but it was
Chargers.
The Chargers when they threw it 3 times out of 4 on the goal line. So this was kind of really getting back to what he knew this team really did well with, how to attack. I was really impressed with it, and the defense as well. I think I would probably put most of the credit for Bill, just because we've seen a big change since the Cowboys game, and there's been a lot of rumors since that he's taken a bigger bigger chunk of the defense of responsibility since then. And you could see it on the sidelines. He looks more engaged. He looks like he's more involved, not more engaged because he's always engaged, but he's more involved in the breakdowns and everything like that. So it's still Steve calling the plays, but there's probably a heavy hand of Bill there. So I was really just impressed with both of them there. And then going into Mac, he had, I would say, his best game of his career so far. And one stat that a lot of people have started looking at was just expected completion percentage. And we saw the last couple games, it was actually a minus play for that. And then this game was at the top of the league. He had a plus, I think 16%. So he was expected. He completed passes 16% more times than was expected. And he was accurate. He was throwing dimes on the field. I was just really impressed. There's nothing really wrong with him. And plus his poise at the line too. There was a few plays where he checked in and out of different plays. There was one in particular where the Browns showed pressure. He alerted into a change. The Browns backed off, and he changed the play back to the original play, and then ran it. I think they ended up getting 5 or 6 yards, or almost 10 yards out of that. I can't remember exactly, but they got a decent chunk of that play. So I think just the ability for him to kind of recognize what was happening with this team, I think that was really spectacular as well. But he had that one drive where he hit Myers on the left-hand side for a big chunk play. There was that nice toss, that lob pass over the defender right into the basket there. And then that Bourne catch for the touchdown. And then a few drives later, there was that Henry catch on the left-hand side again, perfectly placed for him. He was throwing it with a lot of confidence, and he knew where his players were supposed to be. I was just really impressed by the way he played, the way he looked, and just his poise and his knowledge of the offense is just something that, again, not to really knock Cam, but I don't think we would have seen that check-in, check-out play from Cam even this year. I don't think he had a good enough grasp of what this offense was for it, and the ability to read the defense. And then there was that Myers catch where he motioned Henry out to the right-hand side. So that way, with that single high safety, they stayed to the right side to leave Myers one-on-one with the defender. And he signaled to Myers before the play to that something to him. I don't know exactly what it was, but he made some sort of hand motion to him. So it just, those little things that he does is something that we just didn't have with Cam before. And it's going to continue getting even better, I think.
Yeah. No, I thought this was by far Mac's best game of his career, and that's saying something because he's had some good games. Against the Bucs, he outplayed Tom Brady. He's had some games this year where he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and then this week by far he was his best. He was, let me see, his number is 19 of 23, 83% completion percentage, only 198 yards, but he also only played 3 quarters. 3 touchdown passes, passer rating of 142. Like you said, there was those passes, the one to Henry on the left side, the touchdown pass to Bourne, the one to Myers, just absolutely perfect touch passes where it was right into the receiver's hands in stride. There is the second touchdown to Henry where Henry was lined up on the right-hand side, in the slot, essentially, or right on the right tight end spot. The defender had outside leverage. There was a linebacker in the middle playing zone. Mac, once he snapped it, he looked left, so the linebacker playing zone moved to his right, to Mac's left, which allowed Henry, who had the cornerback on outside leverage, go inside and not allow the linebacker to go in towards Henry, which allowed the wide open touchdown, which was just fantastic seeing him just read the defense and be able to do that.
Yep. I think also though, on that play too, one thing where by fooling the linebacker also made a mistake though too, in that there was no one coming across from the other side. So he ended up getting baited too much by Mac.
Yeah.
But it was still a great play by Mac. I think that was the biggest key, but there was also a little bad play by him because there was no one actually coming across from the other side. So He should have stayed a little bit closer to the center, but there was still a great play by Maka there.
Yeah, exactly. And I know some people have been saying that Mac the last 2 weeks hasn't looked good. Maybe he's just a little too fatigued due to having played 13 college games last year, and then this was around his 13th game. Maybe he's just feeling it and he's getting too fatigued. Which I know I called that out when it happened, saying there's no way that's the case. The last 2 weeks he was going up against probably two of the three best passing defenses in the NFL. He was just had tough matchups. Then even the Chargers game, I know he didn't do well the first half, but I think the first half was just I blame that more on Josh McDaniels' play calling. Second half, he was 9-13 against the Chargers, and then this game against one of the best pass rushing defenses in the NFL, a very good defense overall. He was spectacular. It's just showing that he's improving, getting better and better each week. He's been able to read more and more defenses, and if he can just keep this up, the Patriots are going to be tough team to play for opponents going forward the rest of the way and going into the playoffs. He's showing that he's more than a competent quarterback. He can not only be a game manager, but can possibly win games for you. We've seen it throughout him this entire season.
Exactly. And then kind of getting into that, Mac Jones was a rookie, and then we have the rookie at running back, Stevenson, who also looks spectacular in this game. The thing about him is that not only is he big, he's very quick. He's very shifty, but he's also got a lot of speed too. So that's not something you usually get with those bigger backs. But he looked really well in this game, especially for not practicing. I don't think he practiced at all this week. I think he cleared concussion protocol on Saturday. So I think just how effective he was. And then also Brandon Bolden has really gone on of late. He's looked a lot quicker than he was at the beginning of the year. Like I had said on the last episode, that it's probably one of the things is probably just kind of getting that rust off of him from sitting the year. But he's looked like he's taken that white spot really well. He's really effective in the screens. He's really effective as just another runner. And he had a really good game as well. So I think having him, Stevenson, and when Harris comes back, just that kind of punch between all of them, I think they're in really good shape here with the running attack. I think there's not really much else I can say other than just I think one of the key runs, even though it wasn't for a huge gain, was when they were on their own 1 yard line and they ran the ball. Stevenson got hit at the line, but ended up somehow getting another 5 more yards out of it. And that's just something you would have never seen with Sony Michel. He would have gone down right at that contact. Stevenson, I don't know if you have the numbers in front of me. I know you had sent it earlier, but there's the number about how many yards he got after contact, and it's just kind of crazy to think.
64 of his 100 yards came after contact.
Mm-hmm.
So almost 2/3 of his yards came after contact.
Yeah, and that's what you need in a dominant running attack. And that's what this team has kind of shown, that they're going to be gritty. They're going to be able to run breakthrough tackles and get the extra yards that's necessary. And it's really nice to see that shaping up.
Yep. And then just going back to that play on the 1 yard line, Stevenson had an excellent run. But one thing that kind of got missed was Ted Karras is one of the main reasons why he was able to get that run. He was just blocking phenomenally on that, and he pretty much allowed Stevenson to get that hole to move, not only get back to the line of scrimmage, but even get some positive yardage.
All right. So kind of getting into our 3 up, 3 down. We may not have all 3 down, but just kind of get, if you want to say your 3 up and then explain why, and then I'll give you mine afterwards.
All right, I'll go with my more than 3 up as usual. Especially after, usually I have a tough time sticking with just 3, and then especially after a game where they were just so dominant. But number 1 just has to go with Mac Jones. Number 2, Stevenson. Number 3, my man Kendrick Bourne. And then also have to go J.C. Jackson. And then I guess honorable mentions, I'll just not discuss too much, but Isaiah Wynn and Nikhil Harry. So number 1, as we've discussed pretty in depth, Mac Jones, by far best game of his career against a very good defense, a very good team. 19 of 23, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns, 142 passer rating. He led the NFL in passer rating this year, not of just this week, not of just rookies, all quarterbacks, at least going into tonight. Jimmy G through the first half had a higher passer rating, but we'll see after the game. But overall, he was fantastic. Not going to dive too much into it since we just discussed it. Number 2, Stevenson, 20 rushes, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 14 yards. As we just mentioned, 64 of his 100 yards rushing came after contact. He had 5 broken tackles. He was just fantastic. And just he keeps on building. Last week, we thought was the best game of his career so far, where he had about 100 yards total. And then this game was even better, being the lead back after going through a concussion the week before, not practicing, going up against the second best or third best rushing defense in the NFL. He was just fantastic. And then, like you said, he's for his size, he's fast. He's like a LeGarrette Blount, but faster. And just another good rookie. Another reason, just him mixed with Harris and even JJ Taylor kind of showing you don't really need to draft running backs in the first round. You can get them later in the draft if you know where to look. So he is just fantastic. And then when Harris comes back, Harris and Stevenson is going to be a great 1-2 punch. And then even just adding in Brandon Bolden or even JJ Taylor, depending on the matchups, they're gonna be tough to defend, especially other teams running when it's Patriots running defense or running offense is what carries their offense, and it opens up the passing game. So with that 1-2 punch there, it's going to be tough. Number 3, Kendrick Bourne, who all season I've pretty much been calling for him to get the ball more. 4 catches, 98 yards and a touchdown, 3 rushes, 43 yards, 141 total yards. Just as we've noted several times throughout the year, he's one of your best playmakers. That's the word I was looking for. But once he gets the ball, he's able to make people miss, get yards after the catch. And then even his runs actually helped open up the run game, because it made the defense have to think about the rushes to the outside. And then it had to make them think a little bit. And that helped the Patriots open up their offense overall. He's just been great this season. I think he's an excellent signing. He's actually, surprisingly, is leading the team in receiving yards through 10 games with 520 yards, which I was a little surprised to see that, considering we've been saying all year he should be playing more and more. But he has 520 yards and touchdown and 3 touchdowns this year. He's just fun to watch. And then hopefully they just keep getting him the ball more and more, because once he gets it, he can do a lot with it. And then just quickly onto my last 3 on my 3-up. JC Jackson was fantastic. Targeted 5 times, didn't allow a single catch, 2 pass breakups. Another game where he was just fantastic. I know I was hard on him early in the year because he wasn't playing like a number 1 cornerback, but I'd say the last 4 or 5 weeks he's really locked in, where he looks like he is a number 1 cornerback, is possibly potentially all-pro cornerback, and he's someone that the Patriots need to try and lock up this offseason with him being a free agent. Then just quickly, Isaiah Wynn, best game of his career, going up against the most likely defensive player of the year in Myles Garrett, only allowing 1 sack, which wasn't even his fault. He did have 1 penalty, but that was also an iffy penalty as well. Overall, he was great. And then Nikhil Harry, I know we've been hard on him throughout his 3 years. He hasn't been good so far. He's been a disappointment, but he had 1 catch for 26 yards, but then him in the blocking game was absolutely phenomenal. He pancaked Myles Garrett. He had several good blocks on Myles Garrett. His blocking helped open up the run game as well. So I know overall he's been disappointing this year, but throughout the season, when he's actually in there run blocking, he's been very, very good. So just had to give credit where credit's due.
So mine's pretty similar. I've got Mac Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, Bourne, Josh McDaniels, and Matthew Judon. So it wouldn't be another week if I didn't mention him. So Mac Jones, it's not really much to really go on with. You pretty much mentioned it all. Stevenson, again, very effective runner, fast, quick, strong. You pretty much summed up all the other remarks about him. Josh McDaniels, he had his best play calling of the year and possibly of his career with the Patriots. Bourne, like you said, he had that fantastic catch
Yeah.
for the touchdown, which was not only a great throw, it was also a great catch. So that was really good there. He was really effective with those jet sweeps. He was really effective in the passing game. He's just a really good player to have. And then Matthew Judon, again, every single game he's getting pressure, he's causing mistakes, and he just had another really good game. And I don't think I'm going to have a single game without him in my top five, or really top three. Now going to three down. I don't have three down. I have two, and one's very iffy. One of them's down. So one would be Jacoby Myers on the punt returns. I know he's not a natural punt returner. And I think they probably just told him don't make any mistakes. And I don't know if he even caught a single punt return from what I'm trying to think about. Most of the ones he ended up
I think he fair caught one.
Yeah, most of them he had hit the ground, and then they ended up getting another probably 20 yards out of them, put them in deep positions for longer drives, but it ended up not really affecting them. But they need to hopefully have Gunner back for next game, or at least the Titans game, because I don't think Myers is that comfortable returning punts, and you can really tell based on the lack of punts he was actually tried to field. And then number two would be Kevin Stefanski. I didn't like his game plan going into the game. After just abandoning the run after the first drive and not making any adjustments, I think he had an awful game there. So I think I kind of mentioned it before, but just abandoning the run and not making any defensive adjustments was really harmful for them. How about you?
I didn't know we were doing opposing teams in our 3 up, 3 down. Yeah, I think number one, you stole my thunder. I was going to go with Jacoby Myers punt returning. I know it's not. There's just so little in a pretty much perfect game all the way around. There were, I believe, 2 punts where he let it drop and then it both rolled into the 10-yard line or even deeper. Granted, it didn't hurt them that much because they ended up having three scoring touchdown drives of 90 yards or more, but you can't always expect that to happen. Usually teams that win the field have the field position advantage. Sorry, I can't think right now. Teams that have the field position advantage usually win the game or have a better chance. It didn't hurt them this game, but you can't be that. Think it's going to happen every game. But like you said, I don't know how much he's really experience he's had punt returning, so I don't know how much you can really blame him. Number two, this is nitpicking. I'll just have to go with JJ Taylor. 6 carries, 11 yards. Granted, he was going up against the number 3 rush defense in the NFL. I don't think it was a good matchup. I feel like if Harris was healthy, JJ Taylor wouldn't have played just because the matchup wise, it wasn't a good one. But just if you have to go with 3, I think him only averaging less than 2 yards a carry, just something to go with that. Number 3 is also another nitpick, Jake Bailey, just punting. His kickoffs were excellent. I know he was dealing with an injury, but he had 1 punt. It ended up being a 66-yard punt, but that's also a similar situation where the punt returner let it drop and then it rolled 20-plus yards, where if that wasn't the case, it would have been 45-yard punt or less, and given the Browns excellent field position. So just some nitpicking that having to pick 3, those were the only 3 that came to mind. And then just going on punt returning, I'm actually a little surprised they didn't go with Kyle Duggar in the return game, because supposedly he was actually a really good returner in college. I don't know if Myers had experience returning as well in college, and that's why they're going with him. But at least what they've said is Duggar was a good returner. So I don't know. I never actually saw him return. Actually, I pulled up his stats here. In 4 years of college, he had 6 punt returns for touchdowns, averaging 14 yards per return. So actually, I don't know if they just think he's too valuable at safety and they don't want to risk him getting hurt, but maybe if Gunner's out, you might want to consider going with Duggar going forward.
Yeah, or it could also be the fact that he's playing on defense beforehand, and they don't want to have him gassed out there trying to return the punt.
That's true.
Yeah, but a pretty good game, a pretty good week. So really minimal 3 down there. So going quickly, just around news around the NFL, AFC, OBJ to the Rams. I think that was really kind of shocking. I don't think it was rumored at all until
I
it
don't
hit.
think it was either.
So it really came out of left field. Really actually helped them after losing Woods an hour after they signed OBJ to a torn ACL. So kind of a wash there. Been kind of keeping an eye on the game tonight. OBJ hasn't really done much. He actually was kind of responsible for the first interception that Stafford threw. He just stopped running his route, but you can't really expect him to know what he should be doing is after having 2 days of practice. But I think I can't really imagine whatever team he went to this year. He's not going to have a huge impact, I don't think. Even if he went to the Patriots, it's really year 2 if he ends up staying with that team because it takes a while to learn an offense. I don't know really how complicated the Rams offense is, but there are things you can dial up. You can have specific plays for him, but you can't have a whole playbook for him this year. So I just don't know how much change you'll have kind of for those different teams. I don't know if you have any other input on that.
No, not really. Just I was hoping the Patriots would get him just because he has that talent. But the more he dragged it out, is kind of showing he was more in the news of himself. So I think overall it's not going to hurt that much, especially since he stayed outside the AFC. Going to the Rams at first, you thought, wow, they might be a powerhouse, but they lost Robert Woods a few hours later, so it's kind of a wash. Maybe even Woods might be, you could argue, is even better than Odell Beckham the past few years. But not too much. Just glad he didn't end up going to the Chiefs or another team that might hurt you in the playoffs, at least before the Super Bowl.
Then Chiefs and Bills, they kind of look like they're turning around. The Bills, though, facing the Jets, so I don't think it's really much you can kind of say, but still to beat them the way they did. And then the Chiefs against the Raiders, which I was actually a little surprised about how well they played against them, because usually the Raiders play them pretty tough. But that's also when Gruden was the coach, not whoever this guy is there now. But it looked like Mahomes wasn't as risky as this game. There were still a few drops of interceptions that he could have had. But he looked like he was checking down a lot more than he was previously. So maybe he's trying to get a little bit more conservative, not throw the game the way he has before. But hopefully they don't kind of keep it up, because I would probably be most fearful of them in the playoffs just based on the talent that they have on offense. You know how they can strike at any moment. Anything to add on those two, or did you want to get into just kind of how the rest of the AFC looked?
I'll just briefly talk on them. Bills, I think it was sort of close to halftime. I think up until 2 minutes left, it was only, I believe, 10-3. But then they stepped on the gas pretty much the second half of the game. I believe they won 45-3 or 45-7 or 10, something like that. But they look like they had a few weeks where they weren't looking good. They look like they might be regressing a little bit. Then they had this big win, which for the Patriots, when they beat the Jets 54-10 or 54-13, whatever it was, that kind of helped propel them going forward. And then it could be the same for the Bills. We'll have to see. But they did look good. It was one of their best games in a while. And then Chiefs, I know the Raiders, it looked like they kind of abandoned the defensive game plan that the rest of the NFL had of trying to stop Mahomes. Looked like they kind of didn't even try and use that this game, which is kind of surprising. But I know I asked you this earlier this week, and then you just touched on it, is which team is going to be, are you most fearful of come playoff time in the AFC? And I have to agree with you. I still think it's the Chiefs. They have that much talent. I know they have some holes. They haven't been playing well, but they have pretty much the only quarterback in the AFC that I'm fearful of that can actually beat you. I know Belichick historically has shut down Mahomes, or at least compared to other teams, but he's still a competent quarterback that has proven he can win in the playoffs. And then with the weapons they have on offense, they can, if you get in a shootout, anything can happen with them. So it's kind of, I was hoping they wouldn't make playoffs because they are that one team that has the talent that can beat any team or overcome any deficit.
Mhm.
It's just, at least as a Patriots fan, it's not good that it looks like they had that one win, and hopefully it doesn't give them momentum, but it could give them momentum. I think they only have one or two more tough games the rest of the season
Yep.
outside the division.
Mhm.
And then I think the one surprising one was Baltimore getting absolutely destroyed by Miami. I know Flores is a great defensive mind, but it just looked like they didn't even prepare or even show up to play. I've never been a big fan of Lamar Jackson, but I know the last few years defenses have kind of figured out how to stop him. But Flores' game plan especially looked like it was the best. He kept blitzing with defensive backs, which have the speed to match up with Jackson. So if it's linebackers, Jackson might be able to run by him, but using defensive backs, he's not able to. And then he either has to throw it quick or get tackled or get a very modest gain, which is something that I'd be interested to look at going forward if more teams try and copy that method. And if so, if it stops Jackson even more.
Yeah, I think kind of the book is out really on Jackson. On it all depends too if you have the team to handle them. But if you
Yeah.
keep him in that within the tackle box, within that kind of, you force him to play within that kind of phone booth, you can really limit him there. And that's what the Patriots did last year, and what they
Yeah.
really know how to handle him. You don't want him getting outside. And if you force him to throw, he's not going to beat you because he's not an effective thrower.
Yeah.
He's a really good runner, but he's not as effective trying to throw the ball. And that's why if you get up on them quick, they have really big problems because they can't throw to catch up in the game. So I think they had a really effective game plan, and I think Flores just knew how to play him based on how the Patriots have played him before. The Patriots didn't have that corner blitz, but he also knew how they have to kind of contain him. So I think that was a nice kind of wrinkle. This would be interesting to see how other teams handle it.
Yeah.
Just we're getting into the Falcons that are coming up this week. It's a pretty short week. Belichick said on Sunday after the game that they have to treat that night as Wednesday night, and then they're going to be in on Thursday, technically today, Monday. But it's the Thursday night games always scare me just because it's really a crapshoot. No one's fully recovered from the day before, not the day before, the game before. There's not much preparation that could be done for it. There's little practice that you can actually do before the game. It's mostly walkthroughs that you're doing, just because not everyone's recuperated, and it usually favors the home team, or at least the better team,
Yeah.
because no one's really preparing. You can't really have that mental game with them. But I think especially based on who the Falcons are missing, they're missing Calvin Ridley. Most likely, Cordell Patterson won't be ready for the game. I think those two misses, and just how bad the Falcons have played this year, I think it should hopefully be a good game for the Patriots. Matt Ryan, it depends on how he looks each week. He can look really well. He could look poor. Kyle Pitts is the real deal at tight end. So it'll be interesting to see who they have in him. I'm guessing probably Kyle Duggar because he's bigger. But it'd be interesting to see how they kind of play him. But he's really, but the only really one worry, and then if they have one worry, the Patriots will try and take away from him. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, usually, at least historically as a Patriots fan, Thursday games never really worried me too much just
mhm.
because, like you said, it's usually the more talented team usually always wins just because you don't have as much preparation. Sometimes if it's two close games, it might be if there's a superior coach that might shift the balance one way or the other. And it looks like going into this game, even just last year specifically, the Patriots were playing the Rams coming off a big win, but the Patriots were obviously the inferior team. I still give the coaching nod to Belichick, but McVay has looked like he's been a good coach. And then the Rams just absolutely destroyed the Patriots just because of the talent gap between the two. This game, it doesn't scare me too much. I don't think this team is probably as talented as maybe some of the Patriots teams from the mid 2010s, but it could be up there. But I think the coaching gap between Belichick versus the Falcons coach, along with how bad the Falcons have been. They got blown out by the Cowboys yesterday. The Patriots blew out the Browns this week. So unless it's a trap game where Patriots players are overlooking it, which I don't think they are, considering how they started 2-4, I don't think they're going to overlook teams. I think they should have a pretty good advantage. I think, like you said, they're probably going to be without Cordell Patterson, who's been one of the more dynamic players in the NFL this year. I believe he has over 350 rushing yards and over 400 something receiving yards, or vice versa. But he's been dynamic. And then Calvin Ridley is one of the best receivers in the NFL, but he's out as well. So there isn't much. You took away two of their three best options on offense. So it's going to be tough for the Falcons to match the Patriots point for point. Did you have anything else to discuss on the Falcons overall, or?
I don't think so. I think there's really the big kind of key we'll be going over next week is really after this game. Looking forward, after this game, you have the next 3 weeks after this are going to make a break. 4 games will kind of make or break the season. So they better not fall into a trap game here, just based on how important the upcoming games are going to be. But hopefully they'll take care of business. They know they need to win this. So especially since it's a short week, there's not too much they can really overthink going into this. So that should be in their favor too.
Okay.
Right now,
just a couple of just really quick points just to highlight is the Falcons, their passing defense for passing yards allowed is middle of the pack. They're 16th best, so pretty much right in the middle, averaging around 246 yards passing yards allowed. But they have the second worst passer rating allowed in the NFL, 106.5. They also have the least amount of sacks, only 11 sacks through 9 or 10 games for them this year. They have the third least amount of interceptions with only 3 interceptions. Their run defense is 12th worst with 122 yards per game. And then just like you said, on offense, they're going to be without 2 of their 3 playmakers. So this should be a good game for the Patriots to help propel them to win, get another win, and then give them a mini bye going into a big game against the number 1 seed, the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better myself. Patriots right now favored Barstool Sports Book at minus 5.5 with an over at 46.5. I know the line originally after the game, I think, was only at minus 3.5 or minus 4, and it's going up to now to minus 5.5. So that looks kind of more appropriate for how this is. I probably wouldn't be surprised if it goes up maybe another half a point to a point. But it may stay there just because it's a Thursday night game, and those can sometimes be a little wacky. I think even with it being a Thursday night game, just based on how they've played so far, I think they should win handily with this. I'd say 31-10. Just going a little underneath the over. I probably wouldn't hit the over here anyway this week, just based on I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots score less, if it's like a 17-10 to 17-6 game, that sort of thing. But anything, any win coming out of this week, I'll take, just based on it's not a traditional week. And as long as they win, that's really all I would care about this game. You shouldn't really be expecting them to play as well as they have.
Yeah, going into this, I thought the Browns game, I thought I didn't think he was going to be bad, but I thought it was just due to the matchup. I didn't think he was going to have a great game.
Mm-hmm.
And then just looking at the schedule, I thought this was going to be Mac's coming out game, just based on how bad the Falcons defense has been. I think he continues where he left off on Sunday. I think Patriots win 38-10. They're without, like we said, they're without Calvin Ridley, most likely without Cordell Patterson. So they pretty much only have Kyle Pitts, and then I guess you could possibly add Hayden Hurst in the mix, but I don't think they have enough firepower on offense to score a lot of points. And then their defense has been suspect at best. When they've gone up against good offenses in the NFL, they gave up 32 points to the Eagles, and I don't think the Eagles are considered good offense. They gave up 48 to the Buccaneers. They gave up 34 to the Washington football team. They gave up 28 to the Dolphins. They gave up 27 to the Saints when the Saints were without or 25 to the Saints when the Saints were without Winston. They gave up 43 to the Cowboys. So their defense isn't good when they go up against good offenses and even mediocre offenses. So I think the Patriots should be able to score a lot. I know the short week might prevent that a little bit, so it might be a little closer, but I think the Patriots win pretty handily.
And I think we kind of in lockstep there. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week. It's a pretty short week until the Patriots play again, so it should be pretty interesting to see. But again, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review, and make sure you hit those likes and subscribes on YouTube as well. And follow us again on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Thank you again. Listen to us next week.